Have you ever stopped to wonder about the absolute marvel of how we all got here? I mean, it's pretty mind-blowing when you really think about it. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking an incredible journey through human reproduction.
Just think about it for a second. How do two single, totally microscopic cells manage to transform into a fully formed, complex human being? Honestly, it's a biological masterpiece. And today, we're going to break down exactly how this entire incredible process actually works.
So, here's our roadmap for today's journey. We'll start with the spark of life, dive into the anatomy and how gametes form, and then walk through the menstrual cycle. After that, we'll look at fertilization, fetal development, and finally, wrap things up with a quick recap and a look at the miracle of life. By the end of this explainer, you're going to have a really clear, connected understanding of the whole shebang.
At its core, human reproduction is all about combining genetic information from two individuals of different sexes. We exhibit something called sexual dimorphism. Simply put, that just means males and females are visibly distinct and have highly specialized biological roles. So let's see how this sets the stage for the primary organs involved.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Anatomy and Gamete Formation. Starting off with the male reproductive system, it's really perfectly engineered for its task. The primary sex organs here are the paired testes. You'll notice they're situated outside the abdominal cavity in a pouch called the scrotum. Now, this is absolutely crucial because it maintains a temperature slightly lower than your normal body temperature, which is strictly necessary for producing sperm. From there, the sperm travels through accessory ducts like the epididymis and the vas deferens, eventually mixing with fluids from accessory glands to form semen, which is then ready to be transported right through the urethra.
Now, turning our attention to the female reproductive system, the primary sex organs here are the paired ovaries. These are what produce the female gamete, or the ovum. Once it's released, the ovum gets swept up by these neat little finger-like projections called fimbriae right into the fallopian tubes. If you trace that path inward, it leads directly to the uterus, which kind of looks like an inverted pear. This remarkable organ is exactly where a fertilized egg implants and grows, completely supported by its highly specialized inner lining, known as the endometrium. So how exactly do these organs produce the cells of life? Well, it happens through a process called gametogenesis. But the process actually looks very different in males versus females. Spermatogenesis, which is the formation of sperm, begins at puberty and continuously produces 4 equal microscopic, highly motile sperm cells from just a single parent cell. Oogenesis, on the flip side, actually begins before a female is even born. No way, right? Millions of cells are formed early on, but they sort of hit the pause button on their development. It's only after puberty that typically one single large ovum fully matures each month, alongside some tiny, non-functional polar bodies.
Let's zoom in a bit on that male gamete. A sperm cell is essentially a highly specialized delivery vehicle. Just look at its structure for a second. The head contains the genetic payload, and it's capped with something called an acrosome. Think of this cap as being filled with specialized enzymes that act like keys, specifically designed to unlock the ovum during fertilization. Right behind the head is the middle piece, which is densely packed with mitochondria. You can think of this as the engine room. It produces all the energy required for the tail to whip and swim all the way up the female reproductive tract.
Moving right along, let's get into Section 2, the menstrual cycle. This cycle averages about 28 or 29 days, and it flows just like a story with 4 very distinct chapters. First, it starts with the menstrual phase from days 1 to 5, where the unneeded uterine lining sheds. Then, from days 5 to 13, we have the proliferative phase. This is where a new follicle matures in the ovary, and the uterine lining actually begins to rebuild itself. Right around day 14 is the ovulatory phase, where that mature egg is released. And finally, days 15 through 28 mark the luteal phase, which prepares the uterus for a potential pregnancy. If no egg is fertilized, the cycle just simply begins all over again.
Now let's take a look at the hormones that are actually driving this. Notice that massive spike right in the middle? That's the luteinizing hormone, or LH surge, right on day 14, and it's what triggers ovulation. To put this into a simple daily life example, think of this whole process like preparing and fertilizing a nutrient-rich garden bed. The hormones are essentially the gardeners, diligently laying down rich soil in the uterus in the hopes of catching and nurturing a seed.
Okay, next up is Section 3, fertilization and fetal development. As you can guess, fertilization requires absolutely perfect timing. The sperm and ovum have to meet simultaneously in the fallopian tube at a very specific spot called the ampullary isthmic junction.
Once a single sperm manages to penetrate the ovum, it instantly triggers membrane changes that completely block out all other sperm. They fuse together to form what's called a zygote. As this single cell travels down toward the uterus, it undergoes some really rapid division, known as cleavage. It transforms into a cluster of cells called a morula, then into a hollow ball called a blastocyst, which finally implants itself securely into the uterine lining.
Right after implantation, something truly incredible happens. A temporary organ forms, the placenta. This organ acts as an absolute lifeline, intimately connecting maternal and fetal tissues. It's doing a lot of heavy lifting, too. It supplies vital oxygen and nutrients, carries away carbon dioxide and waste, and even acts as a major endocrine gland, producing all the necessary hormones to maintain the pregnancy and support fetal growth.
Over the average 9 months gestation period, development is astonishingly rapid. It's like a time-lapse movie. By just 1 month, the tiny heart is already formed and beating. By 2 months in, limbs and digits start to appear. At about 12 weeks, the major organ systems are actually in place. Fast forward to 5 months, and the mother can usually feel the baby's very first movements. By 24 weeks, delicate little details like eyelashes have formed, leading all the way up to a fully developed human at 9 months, ready to enter the world. And that brings us to parturition, which is just the medical term for childbirth. It's triggered by a set of really complex signals coming from both the fully developed fetus and the placenta. This kicks off a fascinating biological loop. Basically, the maternal pituitary gland releases a hormone called oxytocin, which causes uterine contractions. Now here's the wild part. Those contractions actually stimulate the release of even more oxytocin, which causes even stronger contractions. Think of it like bringing a microphone too close to a speaker. It creates that louder and louder feedback loop, while oxytocin creates a positive feedback loop of increasingly powerful contractions until the baby is finally born.
All right, let's take a breath and jump into Section 4, a quick journey recap.
Let's quickly review the main flow of what we've covered today. First, we saw how the specialized male and female systems produce gametes. Then, how the female's menstrual cycle meticulously prepares the uterine environment every single month. We learned that if perfectly timed, fertilization merges a sperm and ovum into a single-celled zygote. That tiny embryo then travels, implants, and rapidly develops over a 9-month gestation period. And finally, a brilliantly designed hormonal feedback loop of oxytocin triggers childbirth.
And that brings us to our final part today, Section 5, the miracle of life.
You know, the biological support doesn't just suddenly end the moment the baby is born. It continues right on into early infant care. The mother's body undergoes lactation, and the milk produced in those very first few days is called colostrum. Now, this isn't just basic nutrition. It is absolutely packed with essential antibodies that act as the newborn's very first line of defense, providing some critically important resistance to infections out in the wider world.
So, we started off with a question about 2 tiny microscopic cells. And looking back at all the precise timing, the highly specialized organs, and those incredible hormonal feedback loops, I really want to leave you with this one thought. How does a simple set of biological instructions weave together the profound complexity of a human life? I mean, yes, it's biology, but it is also just deeply, deeply inspiring. Keep exploring, keep learning, and please never lose your sense of wonder for the science of life. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.